Yeah, there really is no better time to be a superhero, isn't there?
I'm probably stating the obvious here, but as of this review, we are in the age where superheroes are the dominant genre in entertainment. What was once a niche market in the comic industry significantly grew to become a billion-dollar empire, continuing the timeless tradition of telling stories about great gods and mighty deities, but now they take on the form of people with amazing abilities that have to fight against notorious villains and their own personal struggles. Of course, the icons are still a powerful force in their own league, like Batman, Spider-Man, and the Avengers, but this is also a time where the ones who used to be obscure can have their moment to shine, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, Shang-Chi, and the Suicide Squad. In almost every platform they touch, they become the masters of their domain. The movies are continuously becoming box office champions. There are series that are both expanding those worlds and making a big name for themselves in streamers and channels, and even video games are making the most out of these superpowers. The same can also be said about animation, where thanks to its massive popularity, what was once a rare moment is now starting to take over movies, television, and streaming.
I even noticed that there's been a little bit of a trend where obscure superhero content had started to make a little bit of a comeback, and now their popularity is actually bigger and better than ever. It's not every day that you see content like that actually go and get a second chance. But considering that we are also in the age where nostalgia is highly profitable and reboots have become more and more common, then it only makes sense and makes this the perfect opportunity to see the great return of Young Justice.
Yes, with the main heroes getting all the spotlight, it was about time that their sidekicks get a moment to shine to prove that they are as capable of saving the world as much as their adult comrades with their own Justice League. A Young Justice, if you will. Now, there might be some viewers who are not all that familiar with the DC universe that are probably wondering, what's the difference between this and the Teen Titans, since they are both DC superhero groups that consist of teenagers with Robin as one of their leads. Admittedly, I had to look it up myself, and honestly, there's not that much. In fact, I'd even say that there was a point when they were pretty much the same thing. You see, when the Teen Titans was first published back in 1964, they were meant to be a spin-off series where the sidekicks team up and form their own group, consisting of Robin, Kid Flash, Aqualad, and Wonder Girl. Over time, after more sidekicks got involved, the Teen Titans went through a reboot in 1980 that really got people's attention, where Robin is now paired with Doom Patrol's Beast Boy and new original characters like Cyborg, Starfire, and Raven, and solidify the image of what we know today as the Teen Titans. However, that did come with a bit of a price. With this new look and new members, it gradually distanced itself from its original concept as a sidekick spin-off, especially when the only recognizable character that was a sidekick is Robin. So in 1998, after the Teen Titans are no longer teens and are referred to as just Titans, DC decided to revive that spin-off idea and be more direct as a teenage spin-off-led Justice League called Young Justice. Yeah, even I didn't expect to find myself digging through some comic history. Anyways, let's fast forward to 2009, where DC animation veteran Brandon Vietti and Greg Weisman, straight after his work on Spectacular Spider-Man, teamed up to create a new show based on the idea of Young Justice, with a promise to go in a completely different direction than 2003's Teen Titans. Following its release on November 26, 2010, the series went through quite a fascinating history. Despite receiving great praise from both critics and audiences and winning an Emmy for the first episode, the show only lasted for 2 seasons because, according to Weisman, the toys weren't selling well and Marvel had to pull out their funding. However, after years of support from an ever-growing fan base and a major demand for its return, the WB inevitably heard their calls and brought back Young Justice for a 3rd season in 2019. In a way, it was the Snyder Cut campaign before the Snyder Cut campaign. But, you know, without the cringy fanboys that still won't shut up to this day. And as of this review, the show is going well on HBO Max with its 4th season, and is still continuing the legacy of the sidekick turned heroes.
And sometimes, being a superhero isn't so super at all.
There are some things you just can never prepare for, and some things you can never get over.
What do we do? Pull your energies into me.
Now, it is important to note that each season can be so distinctly different from one another that they can almost be considered their own series. Now, it is technically true that this is not an anthology series or anything like that, and that it does follow one major narrative. But the timeline can be so different where each season can literally be years apart from one another. And there's also the factor of the team members. They can often swap so many different people. Like, there are some new members that suddenly come in, and there are some old members that are suddenly no longer there for one reason or another. That at the end of each of their season, the team can be completely different. So, and there is also one more thing. It's the factor that even the storytelling can end up becoming completely different. Like, that's especially the case with season 4, that the storytelling of that is way different than some of the previous seasons that came before it. So this is pretty much all to say that what I'm going to be looking in this specific review is just going to be on season 1. So this is technically only the season 1 review, looking at the original Young Justice that started it all. For animation, of course. But now that I'm officially going to be diving into this series, how did Young Justice originate?
Well, for starters, it is important to note that this is not a direct adaptation of the Young Justice comics. Instead, the inspiration is from a combination of both Young Justice and the original 1964 Teen Titans, along with developing its own narrative and ideas, which is the case in the show's first episode, as it presents Robin, Aqualad, and Kid Flash teaming up on their own mission without the knowledge of their adult leaders that ended up having them discover and recruit Superboy. As it is a DC series starring the teenage partners of the Justice League, this is combining the genres of a superhero-type action-adventure and a teen drama. Of course, every episode supplies major battles against many of DC's strongest and most chaotic villains, but there is also another part at how the magnitude of their responsibilities are affecting them mentally, especially when they aren't even 18. Technically, this story structure isn't anything new. In fact, considering Greg Weisman's involvement, he already did that before with Spider-Man. However, the key difference here is that this isn't about just one hero. This is regarding an entire league, a whole group of teenage heroes who are often put in situations where they have to carry the whole world behind their backs without failing and learn about true teamwork so that they don't make it about themselves and collaborate for the greater good. And if that isn't enough, they sometimes have to deal with conflicts amongst each other that are common in our lives, but can still be quite scarring, from romances, to betrayals, to trying to work with one another, to figuring out who they are not as heroes, but as their own individuals.
See, from the moment I first opened my eyes in that Cadmus pod, there's been one thing I've wanted and feared. To know what it is to be Superman. And I knew. So I was happy.
In some ways, some of the plot lines, especially outside of the action, are more of your typical teen drama situations where it does adopt some of those cliches in order to create its own conflicts. So there are times when they don't have the most original ways of dealing with their own teenage issues. But don't get me wrong though, this does not mean that this is bad writing. Far from it, in fact. Remember, great execution can help overshadow even the most overused tropes, and this one is real good proof of that. Young Justice knows exactly what audiences want to see when they watch superhero content. They want to see the heroes and watch them kick butt. It does a great combination of both with the materials that it already established for them to make the narratives character-driven, so that having the viewer connect with the team is a high priority, and to always make the action and the fight scenes as intense and creative as possible to keep the engagement high and always wanting them to return for more. And every episode makes sure that they can supply those two factors so that audiences are encouraged to see the team and the Justice League figure out the bigger picture of who they're up against.
These cannot be coincidences. Unrelated criminals are cooperating with one another worldwide.
Exactly. It's now clear our enemies have formed some kind of secret society of supervillains.
Speaking of the Justice League, that's also another unique aspect that it really takes advantage of. This isn't always about the teens and their path of trying to become true heroes. This is also to show a new animated interpretation of the DC universe, to present the Justice League's role to the promoted sidekicks and how some of them can act like their mentors. Of course, they each have a strong bond with who they've teamed up with before, but there's also Batman, who gives the team their missions, Red Tornado, the team's guardian at their base in Mount Justice, Black Canary, their trainer, and Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, whom the series really plays with how he's one of the mightiest members of the League, but is actually just a kid, and shows how he thinks the young team is so cool and wants to hang out more with them. Seriously, if Zachary Levi didn't convince you how he can be a fun hero, then this version definitely can.
Fetch. Come on. Fetch. Please.
Of course, a good story and well-developed characters are important at all, but when we watch superhero content, we generally first want to see the action. Yes, it is also important that we know about these superheroes and why we should go and root for them and all that kind of stuff. But what we also really want to learn and what gets us really excited to watch this kind of stuff is to learn about their superpowers and how they use them in order to kick bad guy butt. And in this case right over here with Young Justice, oh man, does it know very well that its fans and its viewers really want the action. And it pretty much tells them with every episode, you want some action? Alright, here it is. And it's going to be in your face!
If you watch a lot of recent animated DC content, whether it be some of the shows or the direct-to-home media features, then you may notice that they have a distinct style to their animation. Not necessarily something that says high-budgeted, and the look can contradict with its style with how flat the colors can be, but the style does try to stay true to a more realistic and partly anime-inspired feel to set a tone meant to be taken a little more seriously than your typical cartoon. And while this style may not be as awe-inspiring in the context of a feature film, for a TV show, it actually looks great. The animation does try to make the most with the materials it had in order to sell the realism of the characters and the world around them, along with paying attention to detail to show how they are in a universe that's as complex as the heroes themselves. This is also the case where, outside of their own fortresses, they also explore around other DC landmarks like Gotham City, Metropolis, Kurok, and who couldn't forget taking a trip to Atlantis? But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's actually talk about the action now. Yes, they can be the highlights of the series, and they are the best things about the animation. In every episode, they always contain at least one fight scene where the heroes are put in peril against one or a few villains, and have to use their wits and their powers in order to take them down. What makes the action so great here is that they combine both its strongest amount of creativity and a fast pace in order for them to constantly be as entertaining as possible. Considering how this show is only limited to the entire DC universe, they are able to use a wide variety of different powers and have different types of enemies they must face. From the general superpowers like speed and being aquatic, to high-tech gadgetry to enhance their abilities, to martial arts and gymnastics where they mastered the skills of the human body, to sci-fi with the inclusion of Martians, Kryptons, and Xenomorphs, to fantasy with the use of magic and mystic spells and curses. Each hero and villain fits in their own genre, And part of what makes the fight so fascinating to watch, outside of the intensity where they put themselves and often the world in danger, is how it mix and matches the fighters and how they use their powers for the team to work together and fight off against their opponents. And again, the possibilities feel endless in DC. So even in one season alone, it's amazing to think that it can creatively do so much, yet you know that there are still a lot of possibilities worth exploring. Even if there are rematches, they can still be gripping as they can also play a role in developing the characters.
Bet you run out of arrows before I run out of sword. Unless you plan on breaking out the pointy ones to use against your own sister.
Why shouldn't I? You are working with Sportsmaster!
Not my choice. Not my call.
But a little bit of a contrary to what I just said before, you cannot have great superhero action if you don't have great superheroes to root for. Otherwise, you just end up watching a bunch of people fighting against each other where the outcome is just meaningless to you. And that's not really fun, right? Now, I have already talked about how the action is great in this show, but that is only a part of Young Justice's true power, because there is the other part of it where it has an entire league of superheroes and sidekicks and all different kinds of characters, and how they can actually make each one of them as significant and impactful to the story in terms of their roles.
Even for one season, let alone a series, it's a very difficult task to manage a large quantity of characters and make each of them feel relevant to the story, especially when the show has 6 main characters. Not to mention that each of the characters have great voice acting behind them, and that they also take advantage with their own personal backstories in order to enhance their personalities. Going through them one by one, there's Aqualad, the leader of the team with a more stern and serious attitude, but has a true heart to prove that he can take on the responsibilities and do what is best for everyone, even if he can't always get it right.
We did good work here tonight. The work you trained us to do. Together, on our own, we forged something powerful. Important.
The second in command is Robin, the brains and tech expert of the group, and adds a little humor to the show with his interesting use of words.
You're overwhelmed, Freeze was underwhelmed, why isn't anyone ever just whelmed?
But that doesn't make him the jokester of the group. That would have to be Kid Flash, who has a bit of a goofball attitude with his ego and can often be a flirt while having his collection of souvenirs from every battle he was in.
She got away.
Oh, from you? Oh, big surprise. Notice, we got ours. Cool. Souvenir.
Then there's Superboy, who's actually not Superman's son, but rather a clone made by Project Cadmus. In a way, he's kind of like Shadow the Hedgehog, but not really, where he was created by the villains to be the ultimate life form. But after teaming up with the heroes, he continuously faces an identity crisis to figure out who he truly is and if he has a purpose outside of what he was originally created for, with a dark and brooding attitude and a hard time controlling his temper.
With my powers, the battle's always on my terms. I'm a living weapon, and this is a waste of my time.
You know, on second thought, I take that back. This guy is literally DC's Shadow the Hedgehog. He even has the color schemes to fully match. Moving on to the girls, there's Miss Martian, the communicator of the group, where her telepathy powers are quite useful for the team to talk to each other with only their minds, along with her bioship to fly them around. However, she still has to learn about her powers and possibly has the roughest time with dealing with her true identity in fear of rejection.
You know you don't have to put on a mask for me.
I do it for me. This is who I am. Inside. Please don't be mad.
Also, there's Artemis, Green Arrow's latest sidekick after his original quit, who has a bit more sass, especially when it comes to Kid Flash. However, much like Miss Martian and Superboy, she has a darker purpose to be in the team and tries everything to keep her identity a secret, But the more she hangs out with the team, the more she wants to be a part of them and wants to abandon her original mission.
Dad, he must have done this. Another of his stupid tests.
What kind of test?
He probably wants me to kill you.
I'll also add Zatanna, who joins the team later in the season, as she's the one with magical powers and often deals with daddy issues. Rather it be Zatara getting a bit overprotective when he wouldn't let her do anything, or not feeling sure what she could do without him.
I need to know a spell cold, or else have time to prep it. Plus, all magic requires energy, which usually has to come from within. I just can't make the impossible happen at will.
And then there's Red Arrow, who doesn't appear as much as the others in the team, but is a very fascinating character on his own. Formerly known as Green Arrow's sidekick Speedy, he ends up separating himself from the whole league to become his own superhero, but still has a soft spot for his former comrades and does lend a helping hand whenever he can. What I like about him is that he adds an interesting layer of commentary regarding the role of a sidekick, and how there are some like him who aspire to achieve bigger goals than just to be the main hero's assistant.
The team has my respect. I'm still getting used to this solo act stuff, but if you need me, I'll be there.
As for the villains, there technically isn't a main antagonist per se. Even with a massive roster of villains, they don't have just one that is considered the team's arch nemesis. At the most, throughout the season, they keep hinting at an organization called the Light, which is actually a group of DC's biggest and most evil bad guys with a plan to dominate the entire universe, with members that include Ra's al Ghul, Lex Luthor, Vandal Savage, Queen Bee, Brain, Sportsmaster, Black Manta, and many, many more. While many of them mostly serve as the episode's respective bad guy that the heroes have to stop, there are some that do play a bigger role where they give some of the sidekicks an interesting twist to their personalities and the roles that they play. Not to mention having a closer connection than one may expect.
And though you think me a villain, you still accepted my shields. We're more alike than you care to admit.
But you know, I bet some of you are not really all that surprised to hear me say that about Young Justice, especially when DC already has a very well-established animation reputation. In fact, some people could actually go as far and say that DC is actually better at animation than Marvel. Of course, we all know about some of the legendary hits that they do have in their collection that are also known as icons in the animation field, like their 1990s shows like Batman and Superman, or even some of the recent beloved hits like Harley Quinn. But when it comes to Young Justice, I have heard from time to time some people would say that it's also another one of DC's best animated shows. And in the past, I never really thought much of it. I always considered myself more familiar with Teen Titans, so I never really bothered much with those comments and stuff like that. But now that I've actually seen Young Justice, or at least with Season 1, okay, now I know what you guys are talking about.
When it comes to Young Justice, at least with its first season, it's one of the strongest additions to DC's animation lineup. I could say that it's one of the most underrated shows by them, but then again, the popularity and love from the fans are still growing strong to the point where calling it that can be considered debatable. You know, like an Iron Giant situation. It's a series that delivers everything you're looking for in an action-packed superhero show. A story that takes the entire DC universe and presents its own vision by making the most out of all the materials at its disposal. It presents a great perspective of being both a sidekick and a hero that carries an impactful message about teamwork and doing the right thing. The animation is spot on to stay true to that modern DC look. The fight scenes do an amazing job to immediately grab your attention by unleashing all of its creativity and intensity, and having a large list of characters that are all strong enough to make their own unique impact and carry the entire show to have people as emotionally connected to this, both in and out of the battles. Regardless if you're a major superhero fan or not, this show is a must-watch. In fact, I'd even recommend this as a gateway to the DC universe to get a general idea of who many of these people are and what they do, especially when they all work together. In animation, this is definitely one of DC's best, which is why I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10 rating and the Animat seal of approval.
As for your performance, it was satisfactory.
And keep in mind, I'm only talking about one season here. This review only reflects upon season 1 of Young Justice. I have yet to even touch upon the other seasons that follow afterwards, like 2, 3, and 4. And I mean, who knows? Maybe in the future I might end up doing more seasons as reviews, like I'll have a review of season 2, of season 3, and season 4. I mean, that could be possible in the future, who knows? Or also, I might end up checking them out on my own, like just check them out whenever I would have free time, because I definitely had a lot of fun with Young Justice. And again, that's just with season 1, a season that very much stands extremely well on its own. And this is something that normally when I would watch a brand new show, I would have to go and wait like 4, 5, or 6 episodes in order to get used to what it's trying to do and maybe adjust to some of the quirks that it may have. But in the case of Young Justice, it's like after episode 1 or 2, that's when I immediately got used to it, immediately got hooked, and immediately encouraged to go and watch more and more episodes to see the outcome of what's going to happen to these characters, to see more action, to see like more of how this interprets the DC universe. I just wanted to see a lot more. Admittedly, I actually feel quite impressed. And you know what? I actually just thought of this. I'm actually going to go and watch some more seasons right now. Like, what the fridge am I waiting for, right? So, if you excuse me.
A few episodes later.
Okay, why did nobody tell me that this would get so emotionally heavy?
What did we do?